All right, so first up, we have Richard Kern. Mr. Kern has worked in education for 39 years, the last 35 of which he has spent as high school librarian at the Abington Heights School District until his retirement in 2011. While at Abington, he planned courses with curriculum coordinators and classroom teachers, as well as promoted a lifelong learning. Mr. Kern served as chair of PSCA's legislative committee and is a retired master sergeant in the U.S. Army Reserves. Next up, we have Jeff Ney. Mr. Ney is the current president of the Northeastern region of PSCA. Nye, I am so sorry. Like Bill Nye, the science guy. He serves as president of the Wilkes-Barre Area Education Association and has taught at Wilkes-Barre Area School District for the last 18 years. Next up, we have Dr. Christine Plonsky-Sazer. Dr. Sazer is a current Mountain View School Board member. She has taught music in Pennsylvania and New Jersey school systems for over 34 years. She has served as chair of curriculum and assessment of the New Jersey State Education Committee for 23 years. She is currently president of the New Jersey Retired Music Educators Association, and during her long and illustrious career, her students and groups have performed in various regions such as the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, the White House, and the Vienna Boys Choir, right? This woman is pretty impressive here. Next up we have Dr. William Bush. Dr. Bush served as superintendent of Elk Lake School District and Susquehanna County Career and Technology Center from 1998 until 2014. He has a master's degree in education administration from the University of Scranton and a PhD in education and industrial vocational education from the Penn State University. And finally, we have Commissioner Alan Hall. Mr. Hall has served as County Commissioner and Chairman of Commissioners for Susquehanna County since 2012. Prior to his election, he served on the Blue Ridge School Board for 15 years, 10 of them as president. During this time, Mr. Hall was elected to the Pennsylvania School Board Association Board of Directors. He's also been a recipient of the Penn State Alumni Award for Outstanding Service to Public Education. And finally, we have our moderator for tonight, Mr. Christopher Carney, or Congressman Christopher Carney. Mr. Carney has represented PA 10 in Congress from 2007 to 2011. Prior to this, he was an associate professor of political science at Penn State Worthington. Mr. Carney is a retired commander in the U.S. Navy Reserves. Currently serves as federal commissioner with the Military Compensation and Retirement Modernization Commission, appointed by congressional leaders and President Obama. Finally, in addition to being the son of a high school principal and teacher, he's the father of 5 current and former Elk Lake students. Now, everybody, if you've all gotten one of these here, we do have a place where you can take notes, and we are requesting that because this is the first of these, we'll probably do more of them in the future. You can fill this out and hand it to us, things that we can do better or ideas you have. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, folks, I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank Larissa for having this little brainchild come to fruition, and the folks here put it together, Ricky and folks from the party. That said, this is not a partisan issue. This is something that affects all Pennsylvanians, regardless of your party affiliation, regardless of your belief in public education or private education or what it is. Tonight, I hope with this panel, which is fairly august and with a couple of 100 years of experience in education issues, if you listen closely, they should provide some insight that should be helpful to getting a handle on the issue obtaining to public education in Pennsylvania. And this becomes especially a hot button issue this year. You may have heard there's a governor's race going on. And there are a lot of claims and counterclaims and things being tossed around. And that muddies the water. But this issue is far too important to be muddied. So tonight, let's try and clear it a little bit. Clear the air and make sure that we get some good insight from some experienced people who've been in education their entire working lives. So with that, we will lay the ground rules here. I have a series of questions, and I will allow 5 minutes for each of the panelists to answer. Now, we're on a 2-hour hard stop here at 9 o'clock, so we're going to try and get to as many questions as we can. That said, if there is a question from the audience, please write it down and give it to Larissa, and she will get it to me, and we will make that as part of the questions for the panel. All right? Okay, with that, I guess the first question is, and this is one you could probably all expect, are Pennsylvania schools adequately funded? Dick, I'll let you go first.
Short answer is no. There are probably, if you look at dollar amounts, yeah, there's been some increases in budgets, but you have to look within those budgets to see where the money's been put. There's been shell games with putting money in the budget that maybe would cover pensions, that doesn't go for classroom instruction. There's been money put in the school budgets for covering Social Security that doesn't go to classroom instruction. The bottom line is that the money that's allocated for classroom instruction, buying books, paying teachers, maintaining buildings has decreased over the years. They're again looking at a school funding formula. We had one back in the Rendell years when we were making progress. That was scrapped. That was an effort to level the playing field between wealthy districts and districts that didn't have as much resources. They're trying to reinvent that wheel right now. But this governor did cut about $1 million from the educational program. You get into the controversy over whether it was stimulus money or not. Yeah, there was federal funds put in there, but it was with the proviso that the individual states work to find a way to replace that money. It was a stopgap measure. It wasn't anything that could be counted on. And so far, our state legislature and our governor have failed to come up with a means of finding the funds. And there are ways to do that, and we'll probably get into that maybe a little bit later. There are resources available where funding could be found to support education without it being all on property tax. But so far, our state legislature has refused to explore those avenues.
Yes, thank you. Again, short answer is, has funding been cut? Absolutely. Right here in Susquehanna County, you've got the 6 districts that are represented here in the county, and if you add up the cuts that they have had, it's close to $3 million that has been cut from their budgets over the past few years. Dick is absolutely right with some of the things that he has said, that yes, the stimulus money was there and was taken away, but there was that impression that was given upon everybody who received that stimulus money that it was going to go away. The states had a plan for it. There was a plan for it, and pretty much that plan just dissolved. Other avenues of trying to get funding back into the schools has just not happened. Simple things like closing the Delaware loophole so that big companies cannot just send their money across state lines for a 24-hour period and get away from paying Pennsylvania sales tax. I'm sure we're going to be talking about the Marcellus Shale severance tax that is definitely one of the talking points with both Governor Corbett and Tom Wolf, his competitor. There are other things, a tax on smokeless tobacco that could be used to help fund our schools the right way. All of these things, when you put them together, can easily pay for the new and improved Pennsylvania that we all want. This is a 21st century that we're getting ready to teach. We need to make sure that we start keeping up and move our students forward. Our students are the best commodity Pennsylvania can put out. We have to put the effort into making sure that our educational practices in our schools keeps up with that, keeps up with today's society. I know a lot of schools have already done that, have upgraded the technology that's in their classrooms, but there's still more to do because technology changes every time you turn around. So the funding overall is definitely lower today as it was in the past, and as a result, we have seen higher class sizes, which makes education even harder to deal with.
Just last week, passed a bill that cut education funding yet again, if you could believe it. So we're in the state of facing more cuts in our education spending. I'm also on the NEIU 19 board, and last Tuesday night we had a meeting that included over 800 educators to kick off a campaign for fair education funding around the state, trying to come up with some kind of formula to get hundreds of school leaders to join the campaign to come up with more ideas, more ways, and more formulas to get fair funding in place for our state and the Commonwealth, because obviously it has not happened.
Dr. Sargent, can I stop you for a moment? Can you discuss those formula?
Well, we're working on it. We just had our first meeting, and all over the state, we met last week, as I said, all the intermediate unit leaders. We had our first meeting last week, and this is the administrators, school board members, educators from around the Commonwealth decided to start doing something, because obviously no one in the state, our legislatures, and people in Harrisburg haven't done anything for the schools.
Has there been enough something that can be talked about yet?
When I did a report, people came up with various ideas for each unit, and we're going to get that report, I think, at our next meeting. I believe it's October 28th. We have our next intermediate unit meeting, and when I get some reports, I'm going to share that with, I send things to Rick all the time, Rick Amy, and then we can start. We're starting to work on it because the school districts, we're all in trouble. The PSERS retirements have drained so many districts with, the retirement money that we have to come up with to pay the huge retirement bills that we have, and there's not much left for our kids. So this has become a problem, and the educators have finally gotten together. PSBA, the Public School Board Administration, has just decided to start doing something, so we have.
Thank you.
So that's a first step in the right direction, because the pension crisis has really started to take money away from education. And as I said, this bill that was passed last week, they cut it again. I almost fell off the chair when I got the email. I couldn't believe it. So we're starting to do something. Will we be successful? We're sure going to try.
Thank you, Dr. Sargent. Dr. Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. There's no question that the funding in Pennsylvania schools has decreased at the local level across the state and across the state. Back probably 20, 30 years ago, the state funded education around 60%, now it's down to about 36%. And with such a difference in that, you ask, well, where does the money come from? And it comes from local efforts. More and more taxpayers have been asked to pick up that difference. And it's really at a critical time. The pension problem that we face, that just continues to grow about 5% a year. Not only can the local school districts not afford it, but the state can't afford their share of it either. So it's really critical right now. There is talk about different ways to help fund education. As you know, the severance tax, talking about switching that from the impact fee, and that's problematic in the fact that the impact fee, those funds stay local. If a severance tax is put in, they certainly will collect a higher percentage, but my fear is once that's collected by the state, will it ever come back in Susquehanna County? So that's another thing that has to be worked out to provide more education or more money for education if it's not possible. The current formula, one of the big problems that I see with it is the formula rewards the richest school districts. Lower Marion School District outside of Philadelphia, last year's subsidy received either the highest or the second highest amount of subsidy in the state, and they are also one of the wealthiest school districts in the state. And that's consistent with the school districts that got the most funding, are the wealthiest school districts. The districts that are the poorest around the state got the least amount of funding. Susquehanna Community School District right here in Susquehanna County is one of the poor school districts in the state, and they were, I think, second to last in the amount of funding that they did receive. So there are certainly challenges with the funding as we go forward. Cyber charter schools has another impact on the funding. I don't think there's any administrator that I'm aware of or school board that is opposed to charter schools. The issue comes down to how much money should go to the cyber charter schools based on their actual expenses. I think public education officials could argue the point that it should be commensurate with the expense rather than being reimbursed the same amount that the public schools are being reimbursed. So they simply don't have the expense of the brick and mortar schools. So I think there's some of the things that as we move forward, we certainly need to have some action in Harrisburg to help the local school districts.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
Thank you. Being the last one, a lot of the things already got addressed that
I'll
talk
talk
about.
first next time.
But I think the panelists are really echoing what needs to be said here is that, you know, the funding for public schools in Susquehanna County is a major issue. But what is also a major issue is the taxes for our public schools that you're paying each year, the school taxes that you pay. Because of what's happening in Harrisburg each year, the school districts are forced to raise their taxes to the maximum amount they can, a lot of them. Some of them are fortunate enough that they don't have to, but a lot of the ones in Susquehanna County are forced to raise their taxes each year, meaning that every year the taxes go up. The problem that I see with this is that this funding problem has started a long time ago. It started back in the early 90s when the pension funds were doing well, and the legislators and the people in office at that time said, well, we don't need to put any money in the pension fund this year. There's enough money in there, we'll zero out our contributions and we'll reduce what everybody has to pay. Well, you can only do that for so many years, and it's been a catch-up since. When the high-tech stock collapse occurred, the state, my understanding at the time, cashed out and took the immediate loss on their high-tech stock instead of letting it ride and trying to build it back. That's another huge hole that you dig. The funding mechanism that's in place is outdated. It does not work. We see time and time again, you'll hear about, well, Philadelphia needs another $10 million or $15 million, and they send them off another big chunk of money. It's happened several times. But that's funding that the rest of the state doesn't get, is not able to get. So the funding mechanism that they're working on right now is something that needs to be addressed. But what really needs to be addressed in this whole matter is two things. First of all, how is the funding going to come to Susquehanna County? Because it doesn't matter whether it's the schools, the roads, or whatever it is. It seems like Susquehanna County, although we are at the end of the county, last county before New York, we seem to be the last ones to get the bag of money. And what we get seems to be like 3/4 empty when we get it. Doesn't matter what it is. But public education's a big one. The funding that comes to Susquehanna County is not adequate from Harrisburg. Never has been adequate from Harrisburg. The other issue is the other expenses that have gone out of proportion for the school districts. When you look at school buildings, years and years ago when you needed to build a new building or needed renovation, the state stepped up and paid a good chunk of that renovation, paid a good chunk of that new building. They don't do that today. They pay less and less. So that means the local taxpayers have to pay more. The pension fund, contribution rates that used to be at 4%, now are at 26, 28%, possibly going to go to 32% for the school districts. So 32% of what a teacher makes, the school district has to turn around and spend and send to Harrisburg for the pension fund. So it continues, all those costs that keep getting added on are taking more of the pie away from public education. Public education is like a big old pie. When you keep taking a bigger part of it for your cost outside education, that leaves less and less dollars for your education. So when you're paying all the big dollars into the pension fund, you're paying for the big dollars for the schools. When you're forced into a Common Core and you can only buy certain textbooks, and the textbooks rates are out of control, and you have to have those textbooks. All those things are huge costs that are affecting the school district.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just put a little context on what has been said in this first round. Pennsylvania ranks 6th nationally in the amount of local money going to schools, and 45th nationally on the amount of state money going to schools. That's how Pennsylvania ranks. So we could probably do, you know, if I might be immoderate, better as a state in how it prioritizes funding for various things. This might be a little bit of a ticklish issue, but that's why we're here tonight. Are teacher unions a problem? And Alan, I'll start with you since.
Well, I've had a lot of dealings with teachers' unions over 16 years at the school board, plus other unions my entire life. Personally, I don't really see an issue. I've never had a problem dealing with teachers' unions that we couldn't accomplish what needed to be accomplished. I don't see where, especially when professionals can come together and work as a group, that they can't resolve both issues. You know, let's face facts. I mean, you know, unions were started in this country a long time ago because of some of the things that were done in this country by business owners and facilities. When you're looking at school teachers that were making $50 or $75 a week for their salary and had no benefits to go with it, you know, that does, you know, pose the question, do they need some representation and some help, just like in labor industry, the steel industry, and every place else. So my experience has been, as long as you have professional people working together, my term as a school board director, we worked very well together, and we accomplished a lot of things, and we didn't have any issues. And the fallacy that, you know, somebody's a union employee and they're protected and they can't lose their job, that's just a fallacy. If the administration and the people do their job, then a person that's incompetent, that isn't doing their job, won't.
So you're saying that bad teachers are not necessarily protected, that unions don't keep bad teachers in place?
I don't see where bad teachers are kept because of the union. Bad teachers are kept because the administration doesn't do their job.
Mr. Bush, how would you respond to that?
I would say, in general, unions, I don't see a problem with the unions. What's lost in this whole thing is the fact that education is a community effort. It's a community effort with parents, with school officials, with teachers, with everybody. And I don't think anybody benefits when you try to pair out the union and the teachers and say, well, you know, they're the bad guys because, you know, they won't settle, they're not realistic, all those kind of things. I agree with Mr. Hall. The professionals, my experience has been to sit down and come to a common agreement. Certainly in today's market, I think if anybody's realistic and thinks that, you know, they're not going to pay health care and they're going to get, you know, 4, 5, 6%, it just is just not there. And I have great faith that those things can be hammered out when people sit down and look at what's the best for kids, what's the best for each individual community. You know, it has to be realistic. It's just no question about it. Those days are gone, and we're on a different set of conditions.
Well, I agree with Dr. Bush. Everyone working together, all the teachers, the parents, and the administration, things can get accomplished. However, I've been on both sides of the I have taught for a long time. I was an educator, and having been a union member, I have seen bad teachers kept because of the tenure issue, unfortunately, who didn't do their job. I've seen it, and it was unfortunate. It's rare, but it does happen occasionally, and I didn't think it was right. That's why, for me, I don't really think tenure is the best idea. I think a teacher should, I believe in a merit system. If you're a good teacher, you should be rewarded. That's my opinion, because I have my plaques on my wall. I do my job, and I really believe that if a teacher does their job, they should be rewarded and recognized for doing a good job.
So you support the Vergara case in California?
Well, I'm not familiar with the case. I don't do names. I just know that if a teacher is an excellent teacher and does a job, that's why at Mountain View we have a reward system. We recognize the students for doing a good job. If a teacher does a good job, we bring them before the board. I taught in New Jersey, we did the same thing. I think people should be rewarded and recognized for doing a good job. When you don't do a good job and you do not do your job, then I don't think you deserve anything. You should be there for your children. You should do your job and be the best teacher in that classroom. You should be there every day for those kids. You shouldn't slack off just because you're tenured. You shouldn't take it easy and say, okay, I got my tenure now. I don't have to do what I really should be doing. And I have seen that in my career, unfortunately. You know, everyone doesn't always do their best. That's just the reality. I think with any position, any career, I think it happens. As people get used to it and they get used to their position, sometimes they slack off. Well, in teaching, I don't think you should ever slack off. You're teaching those children. You have these lives, these minds in your hand. You should never lose that passion. You should never, ever take it easy. You're there to teach them. Their minds are in your hands. You should always do your extra special best to teach those children. That's what you're there for. Those kids should always be your priority. That's what I did as a teacher, and I think every teacher should do that. It's just my opinion. And when a teacher isn't doing that, I think administration should have a right, after you get 3 bad, observations, I think you should be able to say to that teacher, you're not doing your job for these kids anymore. I think that teacher should be replaced. And that's where I think tenure isn't always good. That's just the way I put it.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Yes.
The Economist said, the Economist Bank said that no Wall Street financier has done as much damage to American social mobility as the teachers' unions have. Do you agree with that?
Obviously, no. No.
Why?
Teachers unions are part of that backbone of American society. We represent fairness and equity to go along. I agree with most of what my panelists, colleagues here say. I honestly believe that every teacher should walk into a classroom and absolutely love doing what they're doing. I teach math and science to 5th grade students back home in Wilkes-Barre. My wife teaches 2 doors down from me. She has a gifted support classroom, and that is our lives. This is what we do. We wake up every morning, we get excited, we get to school, and we are actually a little bit sad when those kids leave. Well, it depends upon the day. So but anyway, we love our jobs, and that's exactly what it should be doing. I need to clear up one thing, though. Tenure for public school employees is a myth, okay? Tenure for collegiate areas, yes, it is what everybody thinks it is. Once you get it, nothing you can do can get you fired. In the public school system, when you receive your tenure after good service for 3 years, what that entitles you to do is a fair representation and make sure that you have just cause before getting your job taken from you. I don't believe it should be 3 observations. This law allows us 2 observations. If a teacher has 2 consecutive yearly observations that are poor, the district then can move to fire that teacher. I'm probably going to take a stand that is going to surprise some people in the room. I don't agree with keeping bad teachers in our profession any more than anybody else. And I will work with my local, I will work with my region in order to do one of two things. Either one, work with that teacher to get them back, get that fire back in their belly so that they come back into their room and do the job that they have chosen to do. It's a calling. It's really not anything other than that. I can't put better words into it. Or the second, I will work with the district to go through the lines to make sure that the teacher finds another career path down the road. There is absolutely no reason for anybody to be okay with a bad teacher. I'm not going to sit here and say that the teachers' unions protect. All we do is we protect people's rights. We uphold the contract. We uphold people that have their day in court, so to speak. We want to make sure that they are represented the best way. And I do believe it's on administration of every building that if they find somebody that's not to their specifications, the state has provided over the years numerous ways of evaluating teachers, which I don't know if we're going to be talking about the new teacher evaluation system down the line, but that's got its own problems, which I think is making it harder on administration. But there are ways to do that, and nobody can stand in that way if everything is done the right way. I also believe, back in Wilkes-Barre, I also not only serve as the region president, I serve as my Wilkes-Barre president, and I call my superintendent probably on a daily basis just to see what's going on, because he and I have been able to work together along with our members of the school board to make sure things are done right. When contract negotiations come up, we do everything we can to help them. We're looking for something that's fair. There is nobody out there that's looking for anything more than fair. You will notice that a lot of schools, especially ones that make the paper, they have these fact-finding reports, and there are certain schools that may hide certain funding, or they're trying to conserve certain funding, or because of pension reform, Common Core, I'm glad you brought that up, that their money has to be diverted. Not that the school wanted to divert it to there, but now we have to all work together. Okay, it's here, we didn't have a choice in it, but now we have to work together to make the best product that we possibly can, to make sure that we produce the best students we possibly can. That's the goal for every teacher, and every teacher in the teachers' union, I hope, feels the same way.
Thank you. Mr. Kerner, should teachers be allowed to strike?
It's a given right. It's through the process of Act 195. It should be used judiciously. It's not something that should be entered into easily. But when negotiations break down, the threat of a strike oftentimes is much more effective than the strike itself. It is just another bargaining tool. Other professions have that right, and I don't see any reason why they shouldn't have the right to strike.
Is the education profession somehow different?
In what respect?
In
Are you supposed to lead by example?
Yeah, well, in many respects. Lead by example is certainly one.
Leading by example, should you go on a strike, you are leading by example. You are exercising your right that's been granted by the government.
Okay.
So, as it is explained and as the procedures are followed, and you need to understand that it is a procedure. It's not we're having a bargaining disagreement, so we're going on strike. There's mediation, there's arbitration, there's sidebars. There's a lot that goes into negotiations before you get to that point. And again, it's simply another bargaining tool.
How effective has strikes been?
Not nearly as effective as they used to be. At one time, I think they were much more effective. Very little now. Yeah, they're disruptive, and that's sort of the point of them. But I think they have increased in their effectiveness.
Well, as it turns out, a lot of the academic research on the presence of teachers' unions actually comes down inside in favor of unions. It turns out across the country, the districts that have higher union representation have better academic outcomes. It also is tied in, obviously, with the wealth of a particular district or a particular area, but when there's higher union participation, outcomes for the students are also higher than in areas where there's low union participation. So,
Just back up a little bit, we started talking initially with the other panelists about, unions good or bad, and we got into the tenure and the merit pay type thing. First of all, I believe it should be more and more, the Teachers Association, school boards, state education associations should be more on the same page. We're all there for the same reason, and that's for educating our young people to the best of our ability with the resources that we've got. PSEA, the State Education Association, has put out their Vision 2020, for the vision for the future, where it outlines what's needed to educate our children, and it makes concrete suggestions as to how to go about this. It's based on the experience of teachers. And we have tried to get the state legislature to look at this, to endorse this, and work with it. Go back to tenure. If you go back historically, it was there to protect good teachers. If you go way, way back in the history of education, there were school boards that at the end of every year would just dismiss everybody, and we're going to start over again. So everybody gets hired at step one. You never get to advance. That's the reason something like tenure was initiated. It's to protect the good teachers. It will not, as Jeff said, protect the bad teachers. I've been involved in counseling sessions in procedures where a teacher has been identified as not meeting the standards, not doing what they should do. And as he said, it takes one of two rounds. It's a counseling session, a means to improve, an improvement track. If the person doesn't improve, they're counseled by both the administration and the union to look for another area of employment. So we traditionally have never said we are going to support the bad teachers. And then you sort of got into the idea of the merit pay. It sounds good, but how do you measure it? I always come back to a very good friend of mine who taught 9th grade science. And every year he would get the lowest level students. Okay? I don't know how to phrase that, but these are the kids that just did not really excel academically. This man, I had yet to see anybody put as much effort and care and time into getting information into his students, conveying the content matter, working with them, working with their parents. But this set of students is never going to perform at the top of the standardized tests. So how do you go about measuring the effort that he's put in? You can't tie it to test scores. You're going to have to come up with something other than that.
You don't give merit pay for test scores.
Okay, but I just didn't know where you were headed on that.
That's not how you measure.
is there, this is for everybody, pipe in as you want to, is there too much emphasis on standardized testing?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Alan?
I had two of my children that I have. One was really good at taking tests, and one was horrible at taking tests. And the one that was really good at taking tests got charged up to take the test and do well. The other one knew the material, could sit down and talk to you about it all day long, show you, demonstrate it, go take the test, did a horrible job on the test. We have decided in society, or the legislature has decided, that we need to judge people by a test. So I go back to the old days. We have a teacher in the classroom. The teacher in the classroom is supposed to be able to take and determine how well that child does in the classroom and how well that child is learning. So somewhere along the line we decided, well, we need somebody to keep an eye on the teacher in the classroom, so now we're going to hire administration. So then we hired administration to keep an eye on the teacher in the classroom. We said, well, that wasn't good enough, so let's hire more administration to watch the administration that's watching the teacher. So now we've got 2-3 levels of management between the superintendent and the teachers in the classroom. But now we don't think the superintendents are doing what they're supposed to be doing, so now we're going to take that power away. We're going to go to the state and we're going to create a test. By the way, I think it's created in Ohio, and that's where it's graded too. And we're going to bring this test in, and then we're going to judge everybody by this test. So where does it stop? You know, how much money do you want to spend on a test versus how much money do you want to spend on educating kids?
Well, aren't budgets somewhat tied to performance? Aren't you penalized if you have low performance?
Absolutely.
Back question.
The new system ties grading and funding. I'm not familiar since I'm out of it, how that exact language has come out of it. But that is certainly part of it. And I think that's a valuable part of education for kids, thinking that test scores are going to somehow equate to students' abilities. Top students are able to do many things that other students can't. Other students don't have the interest. We always had a great resource with the Career Center for kids that, they were not academic students. Never were going to be academic students. But you get them into a field, hands-on learning that they will excel at and what they will do the rest of their life. And, they're every bit as successful as any top academic student. So, again, I think, it goes back to the community, it goes back to the school board administration, the teachers, the parents. What is the best education that we can provide for our children?
Should there be then some objective criteria by which we judge our students and their progress?
I think so.
What would that be? Is it a test? Is it something else?
Well, educators try to come up with these things, but then the politics get into it. I have here, Feedback for Better Teaching, 9 Principles of Using Measures for Effective Teaching by Bill and Melinda Gates. And they never taught a day in their lives. Where do you think the new core curriculum came from? Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and all these corporate yahoos who never taught a day in their lives, and yet we're adopting this curriculum all over the country. And many states have rejected it, and I think Pennsylvania is in the process. Yay for Pennsylvania and all these states. Look at that curriculum. It doesn't work. I'm a curriculum specialist, I'll tell you. And many teachers looked at it and said, it doesn't work. So let teachers just do their jobs and come up with the criteria instead of these standardized test companies. I corrected the Praxis test down in Princeton, New Jersey. I mean, really, it's all standardized stuff. A lot of kids, as you said, Ellen, are not test takers on paper. Ask them the question. There are ways to do things. Let the teachers do things. Get them in the classroom. The kids that can do the paperwork, the kids that are learners, that are language learners, ask them the questions and then grade them. And there you go. There's ways of doing things.
Exactly. Or go ahead, Mr. Carter.
Maybe or Jeff.
Okay.
Well, you started by talking.
The medical profession practices medicine because there is no one way to do anything as far as the medical profession goes. Everybody needs something a little bit different in order to make their bodies work. Education is absolutely no different. We cannot teach the same children the same way and expect the same results. Everybody learns differently. Teachers, administrators, school boards have recognized this time and time again. There are some students who can sit there and work out a mathematical problem in their head. There's another kid that has to use his fingers. There's another kid that has to sit there and play with blocks. They make these divisions in education for a reason. Common Core does nothing more than try to hold everybody accountable at the same level. We love to equate it, and then they will hold the teachers accountable if the kids don't achieve. And I love the comparison that they make that says, when you go to the dentist and you have cavities, blame the dentist. It's the dentist's fault. You did not fix your teeth the right way. No, that's not quite it. Okay, there is so much more to it. If we really want to take, and the other side of this coin is, as much as they've changed the rules of the game, school districts, school associations, and teachers have learned to adapt to the rules, and they have made great successes. Please do not believe the stuff that is out there that Pennsylvania students are not doing well. In last year's tests, in 4th grade reading, we were ranked 4th in the nation. In 8th grade reading, we were ranked 3rd in the nation. In math, in 4th grade, we were 8th, and in 8th grade, we were ranked 6th. The teachers are doing a great job. Then you hear all of these things, these great commercials, and well, compare us to the rest of the world. Okay, let's compare us to the rest of the world. You take those tests and you make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Because a lot of times, especially those special interest groups, are going to make sure that they're not comparing those, because those special interest groups are the ones that are creating these new tests. And say, districts, oh, buy my new test, because this is going to tell you all these things. It's another money-making scheme for money to go somewhere else. And if they can sell the government on it, the government buys it, everybody's got to institute it, it comes out of the taxpayers. If you compare apples to apples, and this was done by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and you compare it, we rank in 7th in science in 8th grade, and in math, we rank also 7th. With all compared to the world.
The whole world.
The whole world. We rank below Singapore, China, Taipei, Korea, Japan, Finland, and Canada. Okay, but we are right there with the top. So all of these, I know I've seen the commercials, I'm sure you've seen the commercials where we're ranked all the way down there. It's just not comparing the right things. You've got to compare the tests on an equal basis. And this was on the 8th grade.
So if I might, can I try to unpack your argument here? It's about Common Core has a negative impact on our international ranking. Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe I can say that. I believe that the Common Core is just trying to use the same stick to measure every child, which just can't be done. If it's the same method to teach every child, it loses an opportunity for us to teach the child the way that they learn.
Differentiated instruction should be put in place, and with the Common Core, you're looking at that.
Right. I taught for 20 years too, and I did it lots of different ways myself.
If I can jump in here, you touched upon this with the promotion of the Walton Foundation, the Gates Foundation. It's called data-driven education. We are trying to reduce what our students do down to a number, something that we can all allegedly understand, which means we're trying to translate this, and it's taking more and more of the teacher's time to keep statistics so they can fill in a block and say we've done this, this, and this, and it takes the time away from creating lessons, from working with students who need the help, and it's a detriment to education, simply because it's being pushed by these corporations, and Jeff touched on this again. You have all these different standardized tests, you mentioned that, it's follow the money trail.
To adopt this set of standards. By a certain grade, a student will be able to achieve a certain level of understanding. Each one of the states took a look at it, and now each one of the states is kind of tweaking it. As a matter of fact, Pennsylvania did not do the United States Common Core. We are doing PA Common Core, which I don't understand how Pennsylvania can have their own Common Core because it's just us. But it's not going to be us. Some of the other states are very, very similar, but again, they judge by 3rd grade, students will be able to do ABC. By 5th grade, they'll be able to do XYZ. No Child Left Behind, you gotta give credit where credit is due. They name things fantastic. Who's ever going to want to vote against something called No Child Left Behind? But in
Are you suggesting that politics?
Never, I would never. No Child Left Behind was just a continuation of the elementary and secondary education law. And it was just, again, putting different goals on where students should be at certain levels. This is just like that 2.0. It's just an upgrade, which still does not address what needs to happen.
Wasn't No Child Left Behind, first of all, came first, and wasn't it more of a test system? And my understanding is that Common Core is trying to create a curriculum so that if a kid gets educated here and goes to Arizona and they're in the 3rd grade, they'll have at least some kind of similarity in training. And other countries actually do use Common Core. We're not the only ones. It's not a US, there is an international one.
The biggest plus that they propose for Common Core is the fact that it's used across the country, so that if, military families in Mississippi and they move to New York, students are going to get the same material. That material also is worldwide, and the argument is, if our students are going to compete with Ireland, China, India, whatever, they should be exposed to the same curriculum. The biggest issue you find with it is, at the local efforts, local school boards, that's a local decision. And now you're saying, okay, let's have a federal approach to local decision making.
The Common Core is not a curriculum, it is kind of an outline, right?
No, Common Core is a particular curriculum.
Yeah.
No Child Left Behind was a federal education act. There was a lot more in it and how it was applied to schools as opposed to just a curriculum.
You okay, Peg?
Yeah.
All right, good. So, I guess we should continue philosophically on this line then. You're saying we're in 7th place globally, and we have a scattered sort of common core, right? It's not exactly a common core, it's a
Right.
common-ish core or pseudo-common core. Do we want to be 7th? And do we want to be first, how do we get there? Go ahead, guys.
I think one of the benchmarks, if you will, of highest achieving countries comes back to our first topic, is revenue of the schools. How much are countries, how much are states, local communities willing to put forth for the cost of educating their children?
And I think that what ties into that too is who are they educating? In some countries, you're only basically guaranteed a 6th grade education. In order to achieve past 6th grade, you have to have the skill set in order to continue on. I'll give you a perfect example. About 8 years ago, I had the pleasure of going through a private school down in the Hershey area. And that was while I was a board of director for the Pennsylvania School Board Association. So we went on this tour. It's a magnificent facility. They do a lot of great things for kids. They bragged about how well they did on their PSA test and how great they did with their testing. So of course I asked the question and I said, well, does every child that wants to come to this school get to come to this school? Well, the answer was, well, not entirely. There's an interview process. They got to go through an interview, and then we let them in. So, well, what happens if a child doesn't perform well in your school? Do they get to stay, or what happens? Well, no, they don't get to stay. If a child is not willing to learn and does not want to learn, then they're relieved from going to any classes and they're off the campus. So if you have the choice to only want to teach the brightest and the best, you can have the best numbers in the world. Simple as that. If it's only about the score, that's what you do.
I'll add to that. I've had the opportunity in recent years to talk to some people that have gone through the German educational system and the Austrian educational system. And as you go through elementary school, you get to a certain point. By the time you get to what we would consider middle school, you have a track. You will go to either a vocational type school or you will go to the academy. Try telling our parents that their kid wants to take an academic course, and you're going to say, no, you can't do that because your middle school grades weren't good enough, therefore you've got to go to the VOTEC school. But it's a cultural difference. It's accepted there. That's the way they've always done it, and that's the way they do it. And now when you compare our rankings, they're comparing their academy kids who have been weeded out, been selected to go to the high schools against all of our kids who we admit whoever wants to go there, and we test them all. So obviously you're not going to get the same results. So it's a cultural thing as well, and as Mr. Bush said, it's the commitment too. How much money is the country, state, whatever you want to talk about, going to put into the educational system?
Okay, in a minute we'll come back. I want to talk about STEM. I think it relates to this. We have a question from the audience, and I apologize, I can't read this. Is this from you, John?
Give me your opinion on private schools and public schools.
Okay.
Sure, everybody's private anymore. I disagree, but go ahead, Ed.
Well, you know, private and public schools, that's always been kind of a sore subject, because again, you know, private schools have been able in the past, and not anymore today, but in the past, you know, they were able to do certain things that public schools couldn't do. I'm not opposed to private schools. I think private schools have a place in our society, and I welcome private schools. I think that's great. I don't think that that a taxpayer should have to support the private school as well as support the public school. I think the taxpayer, if they're supporting the public school, that's enough. They shouldn't have to pay for the child that wants to go to the private school. And that kind of falls in with your cyber charter schools and your charter schools.
Exactly.
And we'll get to that as well.
We'll get to them shortly.
Did you want to check in on that, Dr. Seiler?
I agree. I think the private schools have a tuition, that's why they have a tuition. So if people want to send their children to a private school, pay the tuition and send your kids to the private school. I don't think taxpayers should have to subsidize the private school. That's why I said they have the tuition. We pay enough taxes for our public schools, and so you want to send your kid to the private school, you make that choice. Then you pay your little tuition and you send your child to the private school. And us taxpayers will take care of our public schools. That's what we.
Anyone else? Okay. One of the things that is all the rage now are the STEM classes. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And the U.S. rates, Jeff, I might disagree, that's fairly low compared to the rest of the world. It's interesting that the United States ranks, I have to read this so I remember this, get this right. The U.S. ranks 27th among developed nations in the proportion of college students receiving undergraduate degrees in science and engineering. There are more foreign students studying in U.S. graduate schools than the number of U.S. students in graduate schools. And over 2/3 of the engineers who receive PhDs from United States universities are not U.S. citizens. Does that have something to do with STEM?
Well, I'll start off if that's okay. It's good, cut us off guard, that's all right. STEM, in my time with the state, STEM is a relatively new system. What a lot of schools used to have, and still have, are the career and technical education buildings. And a lot of times, especially when you deal with the engineering and when you deal with the technology, you kind of thought, okay, you were into that track, you went into the vocational arts, you went into the career and technical, and you got it. Nowadays, it seems like any child that you come across has a phone or an iPad within arm's reach, and they need that technology because it's that instant gratification they need to be able to do something. Education saw that there was a need for this, so okay, here comes STEM. Now, science has always been one of those areas where they've always tried to get more and more into because the world that we live in just constantly evolves, so we need to keep up with the time. I know, and again, I'm just going to do what I know in my own district back in Wilkes-Barre. We have actually contemplated in the next couple of years starting an actual STEM academy where certain students not going to VOTech or career technical, they're going to go to this STEM school where they can get their hands in and jump right into this kind of technology. Is it something on the rise? Yeah. Are we behind? I would assume so, simply because we haven't really explored that avenue of opening up STEM schools that recently. This is a relatively new trend coming in, but a trend that I honestly believe, my own opinion, is definitely worthwhile and worth giving it a shot.
Yeah, I don't think that we've devoted enough time or curricular emphasis for STEM. Starting in elementary school, preparing those students to come right up through high school and into college. So I think that's something that we're certainly gaining on that, but traditionally we have not approached that like other countries have.
Does that put the United States at a disadvantage, you think, global competitiveness?
Sure.
I know I'm supposed to submit a question.
Yeah, this is easier.
I'm kind of opinionated on this subject, so I'd just like to make a comment. I have a bachelor degree in computer engineering from Penn State, and when I went to school there, I really struggled. I worked my tail off to graduate, and when I got done, I really wanted to get my master's. Now, my grades weren't good enough to get a master's degree, and I noticed that, in the undergraduate, there was a lot of foreign students, but in the master's degree program, it was overwhelmingly foreign students. And, a lot of them, I associated with them in class, and a lot of them spoke broken English. Now, the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, in order for me to get accepted, I got accepted into Penn State for engineering, but not Pitt, because my SAT scores were not good enough for Pitt. And I'm thinking, okay, well, how do they take the same SAT test? Because they can't speak English as well as me. And I'm not all that great in English, but definitely, a lot better than they are. I'm from Pittsburgh, so it's really bad. But, so I'm thinking, okay, they must take different tests than the American students. The one thing is that I was thinking, okay, I would like to see how these schools charge the students, because, for example, if you live in Pennsylvania, you pay a certain fee to go there. If you live out of state, you got to pay more. I'm willing to bet, I could be wrong on this, but I'm willing to bet if you come from another country, you probably pay even more. So, these colleges are probably, they probably want to accept more students. But with all that said, my opinion is that, in the United States, it should be American students first come, first serve. I should have had a first seat available. Of course, I'm saying that because I'm being biased about myself, but and then if there's leftover seats, then okay, we can take some foreign students. But it's just kind of bizarre. Engineering is vitally important. We always talk about national defense, for one thing. You want to have the greatest technology, but yet we're filling our engineering schools with foreign students. So, my 2 cents.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't say that necessarily they are paying more as a foreign student. In fact, colleges probably have an international agreement that those students may come for less or even nothing. The recent literature that I've read is that the United States can't attract enough engineers, and therefore they've opened up the foreign students to enter those programs. In terms of the cost, my reading on it is those programs are not more than what the U.S. pays. Many times they come for free.
Well, to just say another comment on that, like, for example, my classes was filled with a lot of students from India. And I remember right around the time I graduated, I heard Dell Computers was laying off a bunch of people in the United States, and they went over to India and hired a bunch of engineers. And so there must be something going on where, I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's, it's like corporate America kind of running this thing where, okay, let's do whatever we can to get foreign students in here. They go over to India where they work for a fraction of the price, And now we got all the engineers over there, so now we can, set up shop over there. And I'll quit talking.
Well, I hate to think it's a conspiracy. I think it does get to the issue of STEM training, frankly. Now, my second son is a senior at Syracuse University in engineering. And I think it's about 2/3 of his classmates are foreign students at the undergraduate level. So, they're offering those seats to American kids too.
Yeah, I can share with you an interesting fact. Dr. Bill Daggett heads the International Center for Education. He travels all over the world, consults with different countries, India, China. His statistics have that there are more gifted students. There are more gifted students in China than the United States has students. Now that's an eye-opener. There are more gifted students in China than there are students in the United States.
Also, several billion kids in Detroit.
So again, when you start talking now about globalization and competing in a global market, it's going to come down to who can get in those programs, and will business and industry look at foreign students? Sure they will. They're looking for the market advantage of that.
Okay.
I just want to, I think, can add to the discussion here. I worked at the Watson School of Engineering and Applied Science at Binghamton University for a couple of years, and that's an engineering and science school that has a significant number of foreign students in its graduate programs. And a big reason for that is that there are more opportunities or slots available in science and engineering, but we don't see the same level of American students coming in for those slots as we see from overseas. And it's a very
By the
competitive.
same level, you mean level of attainment, educational attainment?
Well, no,
Or just pure numbers matter?
it's two things. No, we don't see the same level of interest on the part of America, present company accepted. But also, it's the standard in science and mathematics. And I can tell you, as someone who actually went to school in France, we are grossly behind in science and mathematics. And I think that what this fellow is alluding to is that when you get to a collegiate science and engineering atmosphere, the classes are already, in most cases, far beyond what you had in high school. And so you're already at a disadvantage. And you can sit here and you can say, well, we're comparing apples to oranges, but I can tell you that, yes, the foreign schools do tend to segregate people according to interest and ability, but in France, for example, 78% of students fail a grade. How many students in the United States fail a grade? Probably not too many when you really add up the numbers. And I can tell you, I went to 11th grade in France and I had a 21-year-old in my class. And he had been held back 4 times. So the level, we're talking about a standard of science and mathematics education, which is already well beyond where we are when we come out of high school. So when you're competing and you're 2 years behind, it makes it much more difficult to attain that slot that you're after.
So basically what we're telling the kids right now that are in high school that are trying to look at an engineering degree, you've really got a slim hope of getting into a good master's degree program because you're really not at the level that you should be in order to get those seats. So the issue, and I agree with you, my issue is if we've got citizens of the United States that want to attend a college or university, be in a master's program, then they should be in it before someone from a foreign country should be. Now, I realize all the politicians have made all these trade agreements and all these backdoor agreements that none of us know about. But when are our citizens going to come first?
What impact do you think tuition has, the cost of tuition has to do on this topic? For instance, 7 of the top 18 public universities in the nation are in Pennsylvania, including the top 2 with Pittsburgh and University of Park. Does tuition have anything to do with the cost of getting into these programs?
You mean in terms of what, going into a graduate program?
Either undergrad or in the graduate program.
Well, sure, I mean, the cost of tuition affects every family differently, I mean, that's obvious, but if a student is academically capable, they can get help. And there's also financial need based on just financial need that they can reduce their tuition. But they still, we hear a lot of horror stories now of kids graduating tens of thousands, if not more, in debt before they get their first job. That's an issue. But in terms of the graduate schools and Americans coming first, we're trying to come first. They just don't have the applicants.
But if they have the applicants and they won't let them in, they're not letting them in.
But is there a level of quality that the graduate school requires to be part of that graduate school?
Well, we're either about U.S. citizens or we're not about U.S. citizens.
Well, it's not quite as simple as that, I don't think. In fact, I don't know the statistics, but I would love to see how many foreign students stay and become part of the economy, make a contribution to the U.S. economy that have been trained here. I think that would be interesting to know.
And then how many of our students that can't get into the master's program can become part of the economy because they couldn't get into the master's program and become part of the welfare program that we support.
Well, I would like to think that somebody with a bachelor in engineering is not going to be part of the welfare program.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. Yeah. So,
and listen, I go around.
As a father of an engineering student,
I've been to other countries, and I know in other countries that I visited that in those countries, their citizens come first. Their citizens, every person works in that country before any foreign person can work in that country. All their citizens go to school, all their citizens learn several different languages before anybody else can. So I realize our doors are wide open and we let everybody in. But why is it a person that has to go to Syracuse or Mansfield University that their parents are trying to be successful and their child has to go to one of these universities and they end up with $80,000 or $90,000 worth of school debt, which is a mortgage payment for 27 years. Yet we can bring somebody from a foreign country over here and give them a free ride or almost a free ride.
and then they go back home and use it. Fail.
Germany just has free tuition for their kids.
Yeah.
I bet you they don't do it for everybody who happens to show up in the country.
But you can't get it free.
You could probably get into Germany, hardly.
No.
Yeah.
When you sort, because I taught high school for 31 years, when you sort, you can take those kids a lot farther than when there's a mix. My wife went to a high school where they didn't say they sorted, but they did, one way or another. I mean, the kids were sorted out, and they were put in advanced placement in 7th grade, and most of those kids, when she graduated, she had 15 credits worth of advanced placement credits before she ever hit the school. My niece just graduated with 21 credits, but it's a much bigger school with a lot better. How do you do it? In small schools, you have a tough time providing those services because you just don't have enough kids to warrant having those people at the top to do the teaching.
Chris, I think that brings up a valid point here. Part of the issues that we have in Susquehanna County is the size of our schools. In order for Elk Lake or Blue Ridge or Susquehanna to take and do everything, it's just impossible because first of all, they don't have enough students to do it. You end up with 2 or 3 kids in the classroom. I mean, the cost, you just couldn't ever do it.
So, Alan, you're anticipating my next question.
Go ahead.
Do we consolidate the counties? Do we consolidate Susquehanna schools into one?
I think what you got to look at, and I'll jump on this one. This may be a hand grenade, but I'll jump on it. Listen, I've said for the last 15 years there needs to be consolidation in Susquehanna County. Now, when I say consolidation, I don't mean they need to move all the kids into one school, bus them all to one place. I don't think that needs to happen. when you start looking at business managers, superintendents, you know, all the administrative positions, you know, there's could be some consolidation there. When you look at opportunities in the school districts, like the VOTEC is at the Elk Lake School, that's a consolidation process. So can we have an engineering school someplace and do a consolidation on that? You know, those are the types of consolidate. You don't need to move all the kids together. You know, that'll just create more chaos than you've got right now. But I think you can do programs like the math and the technology and the science where you can create schools inside these other schools and bust those kids that want to be in those programs and give them the leverage they need.
Does distance matter and the state of the roads and following 5 water trucks and things like that? Look, those are actual considerations.
Well, we have that now with the VOTEC school.
Right.
And Billy and his group, Allison Davis, Dr. Davis, those people have run an excellent program over there and have some of the best VOTEC kids coming out there and doing some wonderful things.
I agree. When I was in office before, talking to Bill, you're probably aware of this as well, talking to some of the Forest City administration, they really said they couldn't take much advantage of the VOTEC because too far away, you know. Just the travel time, you guys kind of laughed at that, but seriously, the travel time cut a huge chunk of the day. So, you know, is that possible here in a county as far-flung as ours with the transportation system it has? Now, if we were all located along I-81, it would be a different story probably. We're not. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had the opportunity to take a Master Gardener program a few years ago, and we did it all on webinar.
Yeah.
And so you would have us, there was 10 or 12 of us, and we were taking classes that were given down in York County, out in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so it was interesting. I mean, you sat there and you could ask questions to the instructor. They had a camera right there. And so you can do other things besides transportation. I mean, you can transport, you know, a classroom and have teachers all around the areas. So you don't have to get into the transportation end of it too much.
And I don't know, I'm going with moderator. But doesn't it make sense for the VOTEC that if they're going to have to weld, they need to go weld?
No, that's, yeah.
You know.
Some are hands-on, but.
Point taken, exactly.
I think some of it could be done vis-a-vis the internet. My daughter finished her master's degree, 30 credits, in Oregon from a school back east. All she had to do was come back and do her senior project to finish it up.
Well, go ahead.
Distance learning obviously has its benefits, but there are also a lot of downsides as well. We need to be careful about giving that distance learning too freely out there for a lot of the courses because there is so much to learn being face-to-face with people, which is the reason why we're here tonight staring back and forth at each other, because you gain a lot of information just by looking at somebody, how they're responding and how they're doing certain things. It is obvious to all of us sitting up here that we have a very passionate group that cares about the future of education in this county. And I would be remiss if I just allowed that topic of distance learning to be one of the ideas that we bring to the forefront. Could it be used for a class or two once we get the students where we need to get them? Sure. But there's a lot of stuff that needs to build up to that point first, which includes some of the STEP stuff, because they need to be able to learn how to use the technology to make sure that they're communicating back and forth as effectively as possible.
Thank you. So I promised we would talk about cyber and charter schools, so let's do that. To the panel, are these types of learning really what they're cracked up on?
Yes and no. Cyber and charter schools, it depends on the students, depends on the parents, depends on the curriculum and what's going on. When you have parents that are extremely motivated and very involved in their students' education, that spend the time with them during the day, with the cyber programs, then they are successful. But when other parents use it as a mechanism to say, well, my kid's always in trouble at school, so I'm taking them out, I'm going to cyber charge them so that I don't have to deal with the discipline issues, I'll shove them in a room with a computer and then hopefully it'll all turn out, those are extreme nightmares.
Right.
And those kids usually bounce back in 3 years, and they're 4 years behind when they come back.
And at what cost to the school district?
It's at a huge cost to the school district.
They don't wanna
Not only are you paying for the cyber charter school, the school district and taxpayers have to pay for that cyber charter school. But not only are you paying that for the 3 years they're out, but when they come back and they're so far behind, now you're going to pay even more to get them up to speed where they need to be.
So, in Pennsylvania, it was pretty interesting that in the charter schools, it works for about a third of the kids.
Right.
And most of those kids are African American or Hispanic. That's who it works for now. I mean, it will work for a broader portion of the population later, perhaps. But what we see is, in some cases, once again, some quick stats here. In Pennsylvania, the net cost to districts for students in charter schools increased from $434 million in 2007 to $1.1 billion in 2012. And that's coming out of the budgets of every school.
And just my last comment on that. My issue with cyber charter schools and charter schools are their private schools.
Right.
You want to send your kid to a charter school or a cyber school, you pay the bill. We'll provide a public building.
Under state law, they are not considered.
I understand. I can help the legislators make laws that I don't agree with.
We'll send it to Harrisburg.
Now, bottom line is, if you get the politicians out of public education, you put the school boards in charge like you're supposed to be, the taxpayers keep an eye on the school board, you'll have a better education system.
Jeff?
Okay, well, I'm not going to go there, but the cyber in the charter schools was nothing more than everything else, like the testing industry. It's a money-making scheme.
Right.
Okay? The charter schools, and I'm still, after studying this for 3 years, still trying to figure out exactly how the funding module works, because the devil is in the details, and the language that is actually in it for the funding says that the districts will be charged the average rate of the students that are there at equal installments every month for 12 months.
Every day. Now it's day.
Now it's day?
Yeah, now it's day.
But now I don't understand, okay, but that had to be established at the beginning of the year. You can't have equal payments if it changes all the time, so I'm not 100% sure. And again, I'm not the business manager of any district or school board member, but to me that just sounds, something's goofy there. The charter school students then leave our buildings, go to, most times to a brick and mortar school for a charter, and get that education because they think it's something better. And again, it's for a wide range of problems. Parents believe that their students are getting bullied or the teachers are ineffective or whatever the case may be, and then they pull them to go there. When those students leave the charter schools, the studies have been shown that those students are more likely to become depressed, become introverted, and just lose their way in society because they're not getting the same social skills that they're getting in the traditional public schools. So for nothing more than just for the psychological well-being of the student, the charter schools have flaws. As far as the cyber ed goes, now here's an opportunity, in my opinion, for school districts and teachers and associations to take advantage of. Because there is no reason why every public school in Susquehanna County or Luzerne County or Lackawanna County, they can't provide a cyber educational system in their schools and create that as part of the teaching day for a regular teacher. So instead of having actual students in front of them during third period or whatever, we've got its foot in the door for locals, for local education associations to really take advantage of it. I think it's something that we all need to get on board with.
Jeff, how many students you got in Wilkes-Barre School?
10,000.
All right. The heck of a lot easier to do with 10,000 kids than it is to do with 600.
I'm not disagreeing with that,
And
but
it's almost impossible to do it when you've got class sizes, when your senior class has 45 kids in it. Because when you set up that period for that cyber school, for that 2 or 3 kids that may be out, now you're losing that effective teacher for the 20 kids or the 15 kids that they could be teaching. So in a school with 10,000 kids, you might get 30 or 40 kids that would make up a class setting that you could do a cyber. But with these smaller schools in Susquehanna County, it's practically impossible.
And the question is, are you getting the bang for the buck?
Exactly.
Pennsylvania actually tends to overpay for cyber. In 2012, an average, Pennsylvania cyber schools received an average of $11,000 per student. The national average is $6,500. Okay. In 2012, not a single cyber school in Pennsylvania met the annual, or the average year progress, the UIP. So you're not getting the bang for the buck.
I would just throw in that, all the points have been made are valid points. The cost of it, as you mentioned, discipline attendance, students have a tendency to drop out. If there's a discipline issue, if there's a attendance issue, and there's also the issue of socialization for the students. And everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. School officials, school boards, everybody agrees. The only people we cannot get to agree are the politicians. That is the problem. There is such a strong lobbying force from the cyber charter people that we cannot get the politicians to bring the bill for a vote. And the bills that are brought forth with it are certainly not everything that we would like them, but they are a vast improvement of what we currently have. But we cannot get the legislators to take a vote on it because of the powerful lobbying effect.
And as part of the problem, Bill, you rightly point out on lobbying, is that the money that the state schools give to the charter are used to lobby, is part of the money used to lobby the state legislature.
What they also do
It's a very vicious cycle.
And what they also do too, of course, they use, your tax dollars to advertise for their schools.
That's right.
But they also take, and on a day that a bill is getting ready to be introduced or passed, they'll take busloads of their kids to the Capitol with shirts on and run them all over the place and bombard all the legislators with these kids.
Yeah, and take them on TV shows.
Yeah. So do we like them or not?
There we go.
All right, we are at a half hour to go. John.
I agree with that gentleman over there. Not all people learn the same.
Right.
I agree with him 100%, not that I didn't agree with anybody else. I'm not saying that. But you come up with a good point. I taught in the military, I taught in public school, I taught in 2-year college, and I taught in prison. And you hit the nail right on the head. They're all different. People in prison learned better, picked up things better than they did in high school, when I was in high school. Not college, I can't say that, but even college, they did a real good job. But you people don't understand this. I don't understand. And back in my day, if you didn't learn, the teacher puts you in a corner behind the piano. Of course, I'm 80 years old. I'm 80 years old, right? Times have changed. That don't happen no more. Thank God. We don't need that. But, this is the fact. What are we going to do? You know where the problem starts? In the family. No offense to anybody in here. If their child is not able to pick up, I can do things with my hands and my mind. There's people can do things only with their hands, and there's people can do things with their mind, right? Thank God I'm gifted. I guess you'd call me gifted, right?
You're something.
But at any rate, the point is, you come up with a good point. Thank you. I got to compliment you. I'm not discriminating against anybody up there because all of you came up with a good point. But this, sir, I had to
What are we gonna do?
I have a question about school boards. Do you think that I think there's a stigma attached to being on the school board?
Really?
Oh, Blue Ridge School last year, we had 4 out of, well, I don't know how many were running, but 4 of the seats were empty ballots. And I think that happens in a lot of schools. You know, it seems like the only place there's ever a contest is over there in Mountain View. Yeah.
They probably have better food.
But my question, I guess, is to you, you know, the school board is actually, other than the state law, the school board is the administrators, and that's where things have to start or end. And I'm asking you, don't you think there's a stigma to being on school board in a small community like this? And are we really getting, I don't know how to word this without being, are we getting the best? Are we getting people involved? You know, when I was a kid, the doctor was on the school board, the businessman downtown, the car dealer, they're not on there anymore. That's I was in business, it's like a death knell to get on either a government, a school board, or a town council. How do we change that so people start thinking that they would want to be on the school board? Because I think that's where, you know, when you start talking about changes in local education, it's only going to happen in the school board. An administrator can do all he wants. If the school board doesn't want to do it, it's not going to happen. How do we get people more involved and have a higher opinion of service to the school as a school board member?
It starts with the school board members themselves. They have to start changing and start doing business in a better way from what it used to be, I think. It's changing on my board. I see change starting. It has to come with people being more ethical, more open to the public, doing things the right way, being there for the children. No agendas. No agendas. Kids come first. And I think that's where it has to start. I've only been on board now 2 years, but I guess predecessors and any boards, I don't know. I guess, you're right, there was a stigma, I guess, with any board, wherever. You hear about this, you hear about that, but you have to start putting the kids first, and you have to start doing things openly and ethically, and let the public know what you're doing at the meetings. And like I said, it has to be done for the kids, and the kids have to come first and start doing things right. That's my opinion. That's why I got on board. I don't have any, I'm not related to anybody. I don't know anybody's papers and all that stuff that, you know, people talk about and bring up all the time. And things happen.
Citizens and above, but they've got a few years on them.
Their experience.
They're very well experienced. I think the problem starts back in the school. I think we've done a disservice to our society, to the families, by what we've done in the schools. I think we need to get better civics classes back into the schools, better government classes back in the schools. We need to get something back in the schools that educates the children on, you know, you should have a responsibility with what's going on in your community, what's going on with your family. Not that it should be somebody else's job to take care of your kids and do something else. There needs to be some type of programs back in the school to get that type of civic responsibility back into the students. And then that'll bring the next group of kids out of the school that will start stepping up, hopefully, and saying, we need to get involved. It's our duty now to take over the reins and do the right things for our schools and for our county and for our state and for our federal government. So that's what I think needs to happen. As far as trying to change people now, listen, I watched the school district take and raise taxes to the max, nobody showed up to the meeting. I watched the school district do away with football and they had 500 people show up. So, you know, it's not there right now. We've got that generation we've created that have come out of school that just doesn't understand their civic responsibility and why they should be involved in what's going on. They'll get it when they get to be about 60 or 65 and say, I want to retire, or I need Medicare, or I need something like that, and it's not there anymore. Then they'll say, gee, I should have got involved. But we've got to get back into the classrooms. We've got to get back with the teachers. We've got to get with the administration. And again, that's my issue with the Common Cores and all of that. Because we've pushed so much into the classroom in a day that we have to do to meet these standards now, we've kind of moved away from PA American history and our civic responsibilities and what we should be doing. That's what needs to happen.
Okay.
I have parents of 3 school-age children. I've never, throughout the application process with my children, heard anything about anything that the school board was doing. Nothing was ever sent home, nothing was ever made knowledgeable on it without going to search for it. You had to go find out for yourself. Amanda is a member of the school board. I go with her as her nurse to the meetings, to different things. I think the biggest thing is parents are just uninformed. They're very uninformed about what's happening with the school board, the things that the school board does, anything like that. Yes, with football is everywhere because the coaches are harping at home with the kids. It's announced over the loudspeakers to the kids. It's coming home in letters to the parents. You're not missing what's happening with football because everybody's harping it down your throat. I feel like with school board, it's almost kind of like a hush-hush thing. Because parents don't know where to find the information, parents don't know. I don't feel like it's communicated well to the parents that they actually have a voice in what's happening in their school district. That they can go to their board members with problems, that they can say, I don't agree with this, who can I talk to about this? I feel like it's just all kind of kept, like football shouldn't be sent home more than what's happening with your school, how your money's being spent. You know, I just feel like it should be more out there, like it should be presented to parents in a different way.
Does your school have a website open to the public? Are the school board minutes listed there? Are the meeting times listed there?
Yes.
The agendas, okay. Then it's kind of up to the parents, it seems to me.
But I'm saying if it was sent home as much as the information about football was sent home. You know, a lot of these parents aren't going to take the initiative to go look, to go do whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I say this one?
Yes, go ahead.
I was educated in Swin. I graduated in 1962. I had an excellent education. Excellent. I went right into a good job, and I made good money on my own. I moved back to Susquehanna County. My family was originally here, and I was up in the unemployment office in 1973. They were having some kind of thing there, and I met 2 people that graduated from Montrose High School that day that were illiterate. They couldn't do the paperwork. They didn't know how to read and write. And that blew my mind. How did they get through school? And I never had a lot of respect for Susquehanna County schools after that day. Now, that's a long time ago. That's 40 years ago. So it might be totally different. But, on the same token, my brother's boys were homeschooled. One is a doctor in Philadelphia. So, I mean, there's a lot more. We discussed a lot of things and how to improve things. And one thing is the family. You gotta have the family behind you. You ain't going nowhere with a kid if his family ain't behind him. And he isn't behind myself. My mother didn't run out of school. My father was dead. I was, basically thinking in my mind, I gotta support my mother. I gotta take care of her. And I had the initiative to work and get this done. So no matter what you do, you're going to have kids that's not going to make it because they don't have the right structure. But like I said, my brother's kids are homeschooled, and one's a doctor and one's an executive in a financial institution. Not that bragging about that.
Okay. One more question from the audience, and I have a few more questions from the audience, and I have 5 questions from them.
a parent, if you want to go to the school board and you say, the standardized tests are not working for our school district, let's do something different. The school board cannot make that decision. It has to go through Harrisburg, correct? So as a voter, we have to vote for the right governor. Then we have to hope the governor selects the right people.
Well, and then also the right state legislature.
It's not just the right one person, it's the whole group. You know, this has been the argument from day one is, you know, the people in Harrisburg, again, Susquehanna County is a rural county, and there's that invisible line just below Susquehanna County, and most of them forget that we exist up here from Harrisburg. And the funding doesn't come here, doesn't matter whether it's for the school, the roads, or whatever it is, it doesn't come here. Well, boy, as soon as the Act 13 money came out, they all showed up with their hands out. They want to take all the money back out of Susquehanna County back to Harrisburg. So it's not about just one person. It's about everybody down there to understand that they've got to do something different with public education, because what they've been doing is not working.
Okay.
I just want to say that, you know, one thing, kind of answer what Larissa was asking, one thing as a society we need to do is be willing to pay for things. You know, you get what you pay for. You know, I'm running for a state representative, and I'm probably the only candidate in the state that's actually running on raising income taxes. The gentleman from the teachers union, before he was talking about you know, different places we're trying to find money, and he gave a laundry list of items from the severance tax to, you know, real estate, but you know, he didn't mention, you know, I'm sure it was crushing your mind, but you know, he didn't mention income taxes, which nobody does. You know, everybody wants something for free, but you know, we always complain about a 1 or 2% tax, but come Christmas time, you know, there'll be a line a mile from the mall of, you know, cars, people going in there buying hundreds of dollars worth of garbage they really don't need, when we could be using money that we have for the betterment of society.
All right, last question for the panel. I was a college professor for 20 years, and toward the end, before I went to Congress, toward the end of that time, probably 5 or 6 years before I left Penn State, we had to, and every college and university in the country, I believe, does this, or almost all of them, had to have remediation classes for incoming freshmen, for the basics, for grammar, for English, for writing, for basic math stuff, to get them ready for college. These are accepted college students, and they have to take at least a semester, sometimes a full year, to be college ready. So my question to the panel is, are we really preparing our kids for college?
Well, I think, Chris, I'll take that. I think part of the problem is we expect every student to go to college, and they're going to master a 4-year baccalaureate degree, when, quite frankly, all students are not capable of that. We have done our students a disservice, and I say we, parents, schools, teachers, administrators, by kind of promoting, get a 4-year degree, and you'll be successful. Number one, not every student is capable of that. Number two, the job market doesn't require a 4-year degree. Since 1973, only about 25% of the jobs require a bachelor's degree. And yet, you know, we see 60, 70, 80% of high schools tout that we have 80% of our kids going to 4-year schools. It's unreal in terms of the expectation and the job market is going to be. So I think, Chris, that number one, not every student should go to college. The remedial issue is a $1 billion plus issue with colleges and the payment that students and families have. So one, I think that it's a good service for us to expect that every kid's going to go for a 4-year degree. And if we are going to push them, which we have, it results in remediation, none of them have.
As you said, it adds to their time, semesters aren't cheap.
Sure.
And it cuts down on what can be taught, the time that's available with the subject matter itself. The other thing I noticed is that through the years, critical thinking skills had fallen off. Pretty good on facts, but when you ask them to use the facts to solve the problem, that was a difficulty for them. So, and I noticed that, and even the kids who were the brightest in a particular class. So,
that goes right back to your standardized testing and your data-driven education.
Yep.
I was a high school librarian, and my push was to get teachers in the library, to get kids to do research, to do reports, to collaborate, to work together, get into higher level thinking skills, and work together and produce a product, defend an idea, whatever the case may be. The teachers now are so driven and demanded to teach the test because there's more and more importance being put on the standardized test. The schools are being graded high-performing schools, meeting AYP, based on the test score, that the kind of assignment, research, reading, critical thinking, they don't have time to do anymore. And that's what's happening. We've bought into this idea of no child left behind, standardized tests, and there's no time to teach, explore, and communicate. And to get back to your thing about remediation and what Dr. Bush said, not every kid's ready. Maybe we've got too many colleges. If you came out with the idea that we've got to put every kid in a four-year college, so we'll have the colleges, and as Dr. Bush said, they're not all ready, so now we've got to remediate them, but we've got these schools, and we've got this staff, so we've got to create the money. Maybe the whole thing needs to be rethought. Maybe we need more VOTEC schools, more advanced training in the trades, and have people produce things in this country. It's going to take somebody somewhere to look at the big picture and say, what do we really need? But we don't need everybody to go to college because, as Dr. Bush said, it's not the same thing for everybody. There's other things that are valuable, and you've got to appreciate what's valuable in the other skills besides four-year education.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to tie up a couple different things that we've all been talking about here tonight. I couldn't agree more that the testing is the issue. Being in the classroom, being in a fifth grade classroom, which is a testing year, especially for writing. Okay, the state requires certain answers to look a certain way, and as much as we hate the fact that teachers are being forced to teach to this test, that's exactly what the state is requiring us to do. So the reason why these students are coming and need a remediation course is because we're already pre-programmed. This is how you answer a question. It's a 5-step method. There's 5 different paragraphs. You give your introduction, you give your conclusion at the end, and your 3 middle paragraphs are all about the introduction. But that's not who the kids are. The kids aren't that personality that we're looking for on that paper. They're just giving you the same thing over and over and over again. So when they get into college, they have to relearn their entire personality. And these tests are killing us. Go back to the civics and the government. The reason why the civics and the government need to be increased is because that's the only subject that's not being tested by the state. So the schools look at every opportunity to get in the sciences, the readings, the maths, and the writings, and the only thing that you're going to be able to take out of is the social studies, is the civics. And it's the one class that I'll tell you what, I look forward to teaching every single day with my kids because they get a kick out of it, because they just haven't dove into it the way that we do in my classroom. And I can honestly say that across the state, it's probably going on in every district because there's just not enough time. I think your stats are right. I think everything that I'm reading is 70% of our kids do graduate and they go to a higher ed program. I don't know what that is. They say that we're 4th in the nation graduating college, but with what those degrees are and at what level, who's to know exactly what's going on. But if we get away from teaching to these tests, and these tests driving the curriculum. We have more opportunity to teach the critical thinking. We have more opportunity to put a problem in front of students and figure out how they're going to solve these different things. It's not all reading a problem and being able to work it out on a piece of paper. Sometimes it's throwing blocks out and say, okay, how do we erect a bridge, or how do we build something that is going to be here forever? And I think that's where we need to get back to some of the age old. I mean, don't get me wrong, my grandpa brought me up and teaching, you know, the whole world will always need a ditch digger. And if you've got to be a ditch digger, be the best damn ditch digger you can be. And I've lived by that my whole life. And probably the one reason why I went into education is because I pulled all the stunts of my teachers growing up, so I knew all the tricks. And so I got into education, but I loved every single minute of it. And I teach my kids that all the time. It's okay if you don't want to go to a higher level college. If you want to get into the world and get your hands dirty and be something with your life, that's fine. That is okay. Maybe the push should not be to always go to it, but to actually pump out to make these kids the best that they possibly can be, at whatever they go in the future.
Saying the critical thinking is being lost. Ask a child to write a creative little composition anymore. The teachers don't have the time. They're taking out cursive writing.
Yes,
We
yes.
cut it. We said, no, 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 you're not taking it out of our curriculum. They have to be able to still, you have to sign your signature to legal documents. They have to be able to do that. Teachers don't have time to make them think and imagine and create with their brain. Write something beautiful, write your compositions. You don't have the time anymore. It's terrible. It's terrible. We're trying to impress our faculty. Just keep that in there. Keep it in there. And they're trying to do it, but again, they don't have enough time anymore with these tests. So we're doing our best.
I think that the panel has hit a lot of the major points, especially with the testing, the lack of time the teachers have to be creative in their classrooms now. As far as the colleges and universities, I can remember that there was always been a big push. You know, they were always checking the numbers. How many of the students that graduated last year went on to college? That was always a big number. The state was looking for a good number. We need everybody going to college. And we fought about that, argued about that year after year. So the stats kind of showed after a while that all these kids were pushing them off to college, and then we were getting a lot of dropouts. You know, after they get a year in, 6 months in, a year and a half in, the dropout rates are pretty high. I mean, if you check the statistics, they're still pretty high, because we're trying to push every child to college.